IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Vince D'Addario. That's Trevor Trowbridge. I'm Brian Driscoll, and we are back and ready to dive into some more Notre Dame content. Today's going to be fun, guys, because today is going to kick off our position previews, which we're going to be doing over the next 5 weeks. A lot going on around Notre Dame Nation. If you're wondering, hey, are you guys going to talk about the big visit weekend this weekend? Nope, we are not. That is something that we covered on the premium message board. We will get into, obviously, some different breakdowns of different players as we do different shows, but I put a very detailed breakdown of the recruiting visits up on Sunday, and then I've been updating it ever since. Notre Dame knocked it out of the park. But that is going to be something that is for our premium members only as far as all the specifics of the intel that I got. And Trev and Vince, you both saw it. It is a lot. The Irish did a great job this weekend. But today on this show, we're kicking off our position preview. And of course, guys, we got to start at quarterback. And so we're going to talk about the quarterback position today. And we've got a format that we like. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. We'll kind of tailor each one to the specific realities of each position. And I think quarterback deserves to go first this year. I mean, first of all, quarterback should always go first. But it's even more of a big deal this year because it's one of the biggest storylines, if not the biggest storyline going into the season. I would argue, guys, that it's the biggest unknown going into the season as far from a certainty standpoint. We'll have our opinions about what's going to happen, but as far as what we know, this is a big question mark. And so we're going to have plenty of time to talk about that. And then also we're going to continue our series on breaking down the Notre Dame opponents. And we are going in order, as you guys, I would assume, have learned already based on how we went the first 2 weeks. We went Miami in week 1, and then we went into last weekend Texas A&M. Next week we'll get into Arkansas, then Boise, so forth and so on. So it kind of times out well, guys, because I'm just going to be honest. I don't know that our Purdue breakdown is going to be as thorough and in-depth as the last one. So this is a good position breakdown to get into. And if you want to leave some questions, leave some questions. I don't know where our time is going to be at the end of the day, but if we get through this maybe a little quicker than we thought, and we're feeling a little, like we want to answer some questions, we'll answer some questions. Obviously, if you throw a super chat in there, we'll definitely bring that up during the show. But guys, I've been waiting all year for this. I had to force myself to wait to start the position previews until now because you do it too early, then you get to July and you're like, well, I don't know what to talk about anymore. And, the last 3 weeks before fall camp, you're just like, all right, guys, let's just do mailbags every day because we've used up all of our ammunition here already. But, man, I've been chomping at the bit to get to these because, A, I'm excited about this football team, and then, B, Vince, this quarterback position, it's got such a different dynamic to it this offseason because, as we've said before, this is the first true quarterback battle, I would argue, at Notre Dame since, if we're being honest about it, it's the first true quarterback battle we've had since, you could say spring of 23. I think that's nonsense. I think Tyler Buchner would have had to just play out of his mind.
I think 2018.
You got to go back to 2018 with Brandon Wimbush and Ian Book. It really is, Vincent. And then also it's an era that we've been waiting for since these two kids committed to Notre Dame within, it was within, I think, 4 months of each other, 4 or 5 months of each other. CJ committed in the summer of 2022. Kenny committed, it'd be 2022. Yeah. And then Kenny committed in November, I believe, of that year. So the quarterback future kind of signed or committed very quickly. And now's our first chance to truly find out what these kids are all about. And that's and it's going to be so important to the season, Vince. So that's why I'm excited about this and why it was really a no-brainer to start things off with the quarterback position.
Well, and you talk about the competition, and I want to make it very clear. It is a competition. Like it's not fodder for Marcus Freeman and all of his offseason interviews that he's doing, with Joe or with Clad and with, everybody. And it's not fodder for those conversations. It's a legitimate quarterback competition. Now, one guy may have a lead going into the fall over another guy, but nobody's out of this race. And we don't know when they're going to call it. We don't know when he's going to say, okay, this is our starting quarterback. We all think we know when a good time to do it would be so that they have enough preparation time before the start of the season, things like that. But this is a true quarterback competition going into the summer and going into the fall. So we are not, carrying Notre Dame's PR water here to just say that there's a competition. You know what I mean? Because let's be honest, it's been like that in the past. There have been, it's a competition.
Jack Cohn may not start at quarterback, and
Right.
Sam Hartman may not start at quarterback, and Steve Angeli might unseat Riley Leonard. No,
exactly.
No,
yeah, exactly. Like this is not that. There are two extremely talented young guys that have the ability to start at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame will be successful with either one of these guys at quarterback. I mean, insanely talented. And so that's why we're having this conversation, because it is a legitimate battle. And these guys are both really talented guys. It's not a made-up competition. So I wanted to throw that out there because it has been a long time, Brian, since there's been a legitimate quarterback battle. So that's why we're talking about it the way we are.
Now, could there have been a time where if one guy didn't play very well, the other guy might have been able to win the job? Sure. I mean, you could argue 2022 with Tyler Buchner and Drew Pine was a quarterback battle. It wasn't. It was if Tyler gets hurt or plays really poorly, he won't start. It wasn't a real battle. This one is more so. And Trev, it's also different because this is the first time in a while that we really anticipate. You had the one blip in 2022, but it's the first time really in 4 years, or only the second time in 5 years that we're going into a season with a quarterback that is homegrown. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Homegrown, and a guy that's only been coached by the current staff, because even Tyler Buchner in 2022, he went through a lot of different changes during his tenure. I mean, in 2021, he's got Brian Kelly as his head coach. 2022, he's got Marcus Freeman as his head coach. Obviously Kenny spent a year with Jared Parker, but he's only had one head coach and one quarterback coach, and he didn't play in 2022. So, and now you're also going to think, Trev, where both of these kids are going into year 2 of the offense. But I think it's an important year for Notre Dame to finally establish that, hey, we don't have to go to the portal to have success at quarterback, to get championship play at quarterback. I think that's incredibly important for the future of the program from a recruiting standpoint, a development standpoint, and just a continuity standpoint, because I just think it's hard to year after year after year have to go to the portal, and it gets expensive too, to have to go to the portal year after year, which is why they need to have the success at the position this year in order to feel good about, next time they get in this situation, doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a needle mover for the program. You go back and you think 21, they bring in a transfer. 23, they bring in a transfer. Last season, they had a transfer, with obviously last season being the most successful season under a transfer. But you go and you sit down and you look, this is Notre Dame's 5th season in a row with a new starting quarterback. And then just to make matters even a little bit heavier to this situation, it's also the 5th season in a row they start the season away from home, away from South Bend. So when you tie in all of those, that's why this quarterback competition has so much implication to it. Going back to what Vince said, this is absolutely a true competition. If not, number 8 still wouldn't be in South Bend, folks. It's just the way it is. In 2023, it was a competition between Sam Hartman and Tyler Buchner. After the spring of 2023, Tyler Buchner was no longer in South Bend. And so you look at what this means for this team moving forward, regardless of who they go with. They are going with, a very high ceiling kid. They're going with somebody that is homegrown. And we're going to get a lot of questions answered about Gino Guidugli and his job of being able to develop quarterbacks. Because up to this point, it's kind of marked as an incomplete, like we referenced last week. We just don't know what a fully developed, not fully developed, but from the time they enter college to the time they enter the starting lineup, a developed quarterback from Gino Guidugli looks like. And so when you start factoring in all these at Notre Dame,
right?
So when you start factoring in all of these things, makes this conversation really interesting, fellas. Really interesting.
Brian, I want to throw this at you because obviously, we've been following Notre Dame for a long time, professionally. Obviously, the 3 of us have been following it our whole lives. But why in this day and age in 2025 is it important that Notre Dame, after going to the portal successfully, why is it important that they have a homegrown guy? Why does that matter? If they're going to win games, they're winning the national championship with a guy from the portal. So why is it important that they have somebody that's homegrown?
I think Notre Dame should never be afraid to go to the portal if it makes them a significantly better football team. if there's uncertainty about the ability of the current room to lead the team to a championship, which is why the players that are in the battle now were on the roster last year, plus they had Steve Angeli, and Notre Dame went to the portal because they didn't feel these guys are developed enough, they're old enough. Do we really want to turn the keys over? And I don't know that there was enough faith in the town around them because of the lack of certainty. They knew they were going to have a young offensive line. They knew they were going to have a new look receiving core. And they knew they had a lot of key players on defense to replace that. Hey, I don't know that now is the time. And there was a guy like Riley Leonard in the portal who was the kind of impact player you want. I don't know that guy for Notre Dame was there this year, but like I said, that wasn't really an option for them anyway. They were ready to go to it. But I think it's important for a lot of ways, Vince. And number one is in this era of rev share and the way that the system is going, it's going to get more and more and more expensive every year to land a portal quarterback who you're investing a lot of money into. Plus, you're going to have the money you've already spent on landing top quarterbacks, which is just going to cost you now. And then now you've got to break up that $13 to $15 million with the rest of your roster when you've just invested. I mean, in some cases, you might have to invest a third of that, if not more, in one player out of the portal. I think that's a big reason. It's finances. Another reason is continuity. It was great that Riley Leonard did what he did last year, and the team that they got beat by in the championship game also had a portal quarterback at Ohio State. And Ohio State showed last year, like, look, that's a team that for the most part has been homegrown. And even the transfer guys they've had are guys that transferred after their freshman year and then were developed at Ohio State. Like if you go back and think about Justin Fields in 19 and 20, yeah, he was a transfer, but his development almost all came at Ohio State. There wasn't a lot of one-year wonders. I mean, Dwayne Haskins was a high school recruit. JT Barrett was a high school recruit. CJ Stroud was a high school recruit. Cardell Jones was a high school recruit. And then they're going to turn their keys over this year to another transfer, but it's a different kind of transfer in Julian Sayin, who spent one spring at Alabama before transferring to Ohio State because Nick Saban retired. And did he even go? He transferred from Bama, right? Didn't he spend the spring at Bama? I believe he did. But it's still a guy that you've developed and that's going to start for you for 2-3 years. I think that's important. I think having a face of your program at a place like Notre Dame is very important. Think about, guys, the impact on recruiting that'd be happening in the program right now if when all these kids came to visit Notre Dame, they were getting to meet Riley Leonard, who's returning in 2025 as a second-year starter. You know, when you're recruiting 26 and 27 receivers, you don't have to say, who's your quarterback going to be? Well, no, let's see who's in the portal next year. It's this guy, or it's one of these two guys, and you get to watch them throw at practice. And then once the starter wins the job, then that's your guy. So I just think for Notre Dame specifically, it's ideal to have a homegrown quarterback. It's not a must. It's not you can't win without it. I mean, Jack Cohn's team was pretty good in 2021. It should have been better if you had better coaching, but I thought that was a good situation. Sam Hartman, like, look, people can complain all they want about Sam Hartman and he wasn't as good as he was at Wake and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But could you imagine what their record would have been in year two if they didn't have Sam Hartman at quarterback? You know, so you look at those things, and the transfer portal has worked for Notre Dame for the most part. But to truly take that next step, in my opinion, you want a homegrown guy. And then the final piece, Vince, is you don't really know what's going to be in the portal at quarterback from year to year. And I have a feeling that fewer and fewer high-level starting quarterbacks are going to be entering the portal moving forward. That's just my guess. That's my gut. Because of the way that these new deals are going to be allowed to be structured, you're going to be signing Jay Billis. The argument he made is that what you're going to see is that a lot of these deals are going to be tenured contracts. It's going to be, hey, you're signing here for 3 years, and if you don't sign, if you leave, then you've got to pay back X amount of dollars, which is going to mean, backups may transfer, but like you're not going to see as many Riley Leonards or Will Howards perhaps jumping in the portal for the reasons that they did. So I could be wrong on that, but that's something that I believe is something we've got to consider if you're a Notre Dame coaching staff. And being able to, and then the final piece, guys, is I do believe Notre Dame wants to be a high school driven recruiting program. best leader of recruiting classes in most years are high school quarterbacks. And you get to the point where you start struggling to develop your own quarterbacks, then it's going to get harder and harder and harder to get the next CJ Carr, to get the next Kenny Minchie, to get the next Noah Grubbs type of player. It just is going to get harder and harder to do that. And so those are the reasons why I think it's very important that you can show you can have success with a high school quarterback. Doesn't mean you can't ever go to the portal again. And it just means this is ideally the beginning of where that's just an anomaly type of season as opposed to a pattern, which it had been for Notre Dame for the last 4 years.
Yeah, Brian, I couldn't agree more. You go back and you listen to what Marcus Freeman talks about their philosophy around the transfer portal. You want to supplement your roster. You don't want to be built through the transfer portal. I think the terminology he uses, they want to major in high school recruiting and minor in the transfer portal. Starting quarterback at Notre Dame is a pretty high-octane position and something that I'm sure they don't want to continue to supplement through the portal, to your point. And so that's what makes this competition so big. They had to wait for the recruiting and the development to catch up to where they were at now. And so that's why, to Vince's question, they had to go to the portal a little bit, because last season, as much as we loved him, Steve Angeli wasn't going to do to Georgia what Riley Leonard was able to do to Georgia. A redshirt freshman Kenny Minchie wasn't going to be able to, and a true freshman CJ Carr wasn't going to be able to. That was the state of the roster then. But there's a reason why they didn't go to the transfer portal this offseason to bring in a quarterback, even after a veteran like Steve Angeli left. Now they're ready to roll with these two guys, which is a good transition into really the breakdown of this overall competition.
And one thing I'll say, Trev, is I think it's smarter money. Because it's not like if whoever wins the starting job this year goes out there and he's really good and then he's really good again next year, those guys are going to cost you money as well. But it's like with anything else, I'd rather spend my money on guys that are here. And my team is going to be a lot less fractured if the guy they know that they know the work he's put in, they know the leadership he's established, they know the character of that guy is getting that big deal, as opposed to some dude they've never met before. And then you're hoping that those guys are all like what Riley Leonard was character-wise. I mean, Jack Cohn was a great, well-liked by his teammates. Sam was to a degree. Riley was beloved by his teammates. But, again, you can't always know that kind of guy is going to be out there and also have the talent to go win for you.
So you make a good point when you bring up the money, and I think this is going to be something interesting. I know I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but I think it's going to be interesting to see, and they're not going to publish these things, and it's not going to be maybe readily available. But if you've already got a kid on your roster, let's say Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr, right, and they become the starter at Notre Dame, and obviously their value would go up at that point. What are they being paid versus somebody that you would have to go out into the portal, into quote unquote free agency to get? Are they going to get a kind of, not a hometown discount, but like you're already on the roster, you're here for a reason.
It's an unproven discount. That's what it is. I mean,
yeah, right.
You're going to still be paying to get a high school kid that's pretty good, but it's not going to be the number it is when you're trying to go get a portal guy.
Yeah.
And so that guy eventually is going to make the money a portal guy would, but it's like with anything else. It's like you draft. It's like this. You think about this. You draft a quarterback in the first round. You're going to have to pay him a pretty penny, but it doesn't compare. Like this talking NFL, it still doesn't compare when he's on his rookie contract, what everybody else is paying a quarterback on his second, third, fourth contract, where they're making $30, $40, $50 million a year. I mean, Daniel Jones got paid $50 million a year. Brock Purdy just made a $50 million contract. You just got a $50 million a year contract. And I'm old enough to remember when John Elway, I think, was the first quarterback to be paid $1 million a year. And now that's like chump change for like a high school, top 5-star high school kid, but the point being it's eventually going to get there. But as the increment gets there, like CJ Carr is not going to make as much money this year, most likely, from what I understand, as what your top portal guy would have got paid. I mean, Duke's paying a kid they got from Tulane like $3 million a year. And he's a good player, but that's because you're now in a bidding war for those guys. And you are in high school, but then it's like, okay, now you got to go prove yourself. And so that's kind of That's kind of where it's at. That's why that factors into me. So, I mean, you're still paying – that position's still going to make money, but it's not going to be like it is in that 1 year where you've got to put these big packages together to compete to even get a kid there. That's just a much tougher situation. And then now you've got to do that every single year with those type of players. And it can be challenging. And then it can also create more opportunities for friction within your team, where you pay this guy, we don't know, like $5 million to come here. Like, what has that guy done? That can get you into some really tough situations from a team building standpoint. And so I think that factors into it as well. Guys will have much less of a problem when one of their boys is getting paid, because they understand, like, yeah, of course that guy's getting paid. Did you see him throwing last year? Did you see what that type of thing?
We are going to move on to some evaluations, but before we do, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I want to talk. There's a couple things I want to talk about that are
yeah.
part of this quarterback preview. The history of the first-year guys, which I think factors into this conversation. And then I do think there's a part of, before we get into the specific players, of there's a unique burden on the shoulders of whoever this quarterback is going to be. But I wanted to respond to something, because one thing we get a lot, Trev, in the chat when we're talking about quarterbacks is a comments about, well, should it, and I've got this on the message board. Should we expect Notre Dame, or is it asking too much of Notre Dame to be able to play for a title, win a title with a freshman quarterback, referring to CJ, or a first-year starter, to people who are more open to the idea of either or? Well, number one, I want to continue to point out, CJ Carr is a redshirt freshman, not a freshman. That's not a semantic difference. That is a legitimate difference, because this is going to be CJ Carr's fourth semester on campus, where a true freshman is going into his second semester on campus. That matters. CJ Carr's been a part of bowl prep for 2 different seasons and at Notre Dame. Kenny has as well. And so it is different. But I also think, guys, one thing that I put together is, when you look at the bowl era, last year, I believe, was the first year that a Final Four team did not have a first-year starting quarterback. Now, not first-year starting quarterback at their school, but a guy who was starting as the starter for the first time. And because you obviously, Will Howard started for a couple seasons at Kansas State. Riley Leonard started for 2 years at Duke. You had Drew Aller was in his second year at Penn State. And then, of course, Quinn Ewers is in his third or fourth year, starting at Texas. So third year starting at Texas. So you look at 2023, Jalen Milroe was a first-year starter. In 2022, J.J. McCarthy was a first-year starter and a second-year player. So Jalen Milroe in 2023 was in the same grade that Kenny Minchie is now, and in 2022, J.J. McCarthy was in the same grade that C.J. Carr is in now. Now, J.J. played more as a freshman than C.J. obviously did, but it's not a significant amount to where it's like, okay, it's apples to oranges. So I don't think it matters as much. I don't think getting some mop-up minutes at the end of games necessarily impacts you the way that it did. J.J. McCarthy was not asked to lead the team to a championship. He was asked to just, dude, you're along for the ride. Make some plays. Don't screw it up. 2021, you had 2 different first-year starters at quarterback. You had a redshirt freshman in Bryce Young at Alabama, and you had Cade McNamara. So for 2 years in a row, Michigan had a different first-year quarterback starting, because Cade McNamara that year. 2020, there was no first-year starter in 2020. You had Justin Fields. You had Trevor Lawrence. You had Mac Jones. Mac Jones was technically a first-year starter in that it was the first year he was the guy, but he had started multiple games the year before in place of Tua Tagovailoa, who was injured, and he threw for over 1,000 yards. That's a much different situation than what Kenny and CJ are walking into. 2019, Justin Fields was his first year as a starter. He was a redshirt freshman, or he was a sophomore. 2018, Ian Book. You had 2, Ian Book and Trevor Lawrence were first-year starters. Ian Book was a redshirt sophomore, same grade as Kenny. Trevor Lawrence was a true freshman. 2017, Georgia had a first-year starting quarterback and a true freshman in Jake Fromm, who took over in game 2. 2016, you had a true freshman starting in the championship game. So 3 years in a row, in 16, 17, and 18, you had a true freshman starting in the national championship game. And let's see, one of those guys won it. The other two lost. 2015, Jacob Coker was a first-year starter at Alabama. He was a senior. In 2014, JT Barrett was basically a second-year player, redshirt freshman at Ohio State. Now, he did not play in the postseason because of the injury he suffered against Michigan, but he was the quarterback that got them to that point. He got hurt against Michigan, and then Cardell Jones took it over from there. So that situation had already been established. And then also in 2014, Blake Sims was a first-year starter at Alabama. Also want to point out that Jake Browning was a true sophomore in 2016 when he led Washington to the championship or to the semifinals. But he started the year before, but saw a huge jump, true sophomore. And then, of course, in 2015, Deshaun Watson was also a true sophomore, but he had started games the year before and played a decent amount the year before. Looking at the 5 years before the playoff started, in 2013, Florida State versus Auburn, 2 first-year starting quarterbacks, Jameis Winston being a redshirt freshman. Keep in mind that in 2013, there was not the same redshirt rule, so that meant Jameis Winston did not play at all in 2012. 2012, Notre Dame started a redshirt freshman who did not play a snap the year before, Never Golson. 2011, A.J. McCarron was a first-year starter at Alabama. In 2010, Cam Newton and Darren Thomas were first-year starters in college. Cam Newton had obviously started at JUCO. Nick Marshall in 2013 also started at a JUCO, which is a very different animal than D1. And then 2019, Greg McElroy was a first-year starter as well at Alabama. So I just think those things need to be pointed out that, guys, first-year starters and young first-year starters is not a rare thing in college football. What it requires is one of two things. Number one, most of those kids played on a very good team, where even Trevor Lawrence in 2018, where he was not asked to be 2020 version of Trevor Lawrence. He could just kind of, make some plays when you need him to. And, same thing with like 2016, Jalen Hurts. And most of those guys were very talented. But even there, you have a Jake Fromm, who's not in the same league as a Jalen Hurts or a Trevor Lawrence or a Justin Fields or even a J.J. McCarthy. So we've seen all types of different quarterbacks step up. Some of them are athletic guys. Some of them are drop back guys. There's no constant pattern to the success of those players other than this. They were part of really, really good teams, and they didn't have to put those teams on their shoulders and lead them to victory. And that's why I do have much more confidence, Trev, in these young quarterbacks being successful, because they don't need them to carry this team the way that Riley Leonard had to carry that team for Notre Dame last year.
100%. That is the thing that they all have in common. The supporting cast on either side of the ball were outstanding for all of those first-time starters that you listed. The other thing that they had in common, there are moments in all of those seasons for all the quarterbacks that you listed off that at some point, and this is going back to the expectations of this group conversation, there were moments, not throughout the duration of the season, like what Riley Leonard had to do, but there were moments where it's like, hey, we need you to go make a play here. Hey, we need you to go push the ball into the end zone on this particular drive, in this moment, in this quarter. And that's consistent throughout all of these quarterbacks. I go back and think of Everett Golson in 2012 against Pitt. Hey, second half against Pitt, you're going to have to play at another level to get us back into this game. I think about the Georgia-Oklahoma game in the Rose Bowl in that playoff. Nick Chubb and Sony Michel were kind of dominating, but Oklahoma, they got a couple key turnovers. Kirby Smart looked to Jake Fromm and was like, hey, we need you on this drive. We need you to go punch it in, throws a touchdown pass to Javon Wims. And so there's a lot of different things here that are in common, but it's something that I feel confident with these two kids that it is 100% in their realm of capability to just kind of be a distributing point guard, but at moments, drive the lane, make a play, do what you got to do.
To your point, in that semifinal game against Georgia, which is still one of the best playoff games we ever had, Jake Fromm went 20 of 29 for 210 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. The running game, 34 carries for 317 yards. I mean, but Vince, you and I saw with our own eyes, because we were both in the Notre Dame Stadium that day, in Jake Fromm's first career start, where he made some absolutely money throws down the stretch. of that game, win that game.
I like Jake Fromm. I actually
he
like
just
him as
doesn't
a
have the
quarterback.
elite talent.
Yeah, right.
That
He needs to have talent around him, and he could be really good.
He's not a Trevor Lawrence, a Justin Fields, a guy like that. But that kid had guts, and he had he still got drafted, so it's not like he was some bum that just turned around and handed the ball off all day. He had talent. He just didn't have elite talent. And so that's why I say I just don't worry about that as much, because good teams consistently get led by young quarterbacks, including Notre Dame, who played for the national championship in 2012 with a redshirt freshman quarterback who played fewer snaps than what CJ Carr played last year during his freshman year.
Right.
But that's the same story, Vince. Notre Dame didn't, and Brian Kelly said it all the time, they didn't ask Everett Golson to drive the bus. And I think CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey are both more prepared from the mental standpoint to run the show than Everett was. Now, can they be the playmakers Everett was? That's a different conversation. But it's just ironic that when you look at it, Notre Dame's played for the championship, gotten at least to the semifinals 4 times since 2010. And in 3 of those years, they were led by a first-time starter. 2 of those times, it was a guy that hadn't started anywhere else. Ian Book had 1 career start, and it was the year before at North Carolina, and he wasn't very good in that game. So that's one of those things, guys, where if the guy's good, this is the only concern. If the guy's not good enough, then it's a problem. But if he's good enough, this team is good enough where you're not asking that player to go carry the team the way that Everett Golson had to do, the way that Riley Leonard had to do last year, the way that Cam Newton did for Auburn in 2010. CJ Carr's not leading that team to a championship in 2010. Cam was an anomaly and a guy that had played a lot of JUCO football. I'm not saying CJ has to go be Jameis Winston. I'm not saying, but he is good enough as a redshirt freshman to be that kind of player. And then Kenny Minchey's a redshirt sophomore who's had 2 different seasons where he's got on the field and thrown passes. So I'm just not as concerned about it, because I have evidence to tell me that if the team is good enough, they don't need that guy to play to his full potential. They just need him to play to his potential that season of like where he is. They don't need Kenny Minchey to play like 5th-year senior version of Kenny Minchey, or CJ Carr to play like senior year version of. They just need him to be the best versions of themselves at where they are in their development. So I just think it's smart to point out that, because that is it's a valid question, guys. It is a very valid question to ask. Is it fair to expect a young quarterback to lead this team to a championship? And the answer is, with the talent he'll inherit, yeah, it's reasonable. It's reasonable to say that this team can make a run and that the quarterback won't be this giant stumbling block, because honestly, at the end of the day, Vince, they have 2 very talented quarterbacks that are battling for this job. I mean, they have more than just 2, but they have 2 that are battling for this job. And, that's a big piece to this.
So before we get into the specific breakdown, because I did want to bring up this point as well, and I'll throw it to Trevor to kick it off. We've established Notre Dame's going to have a first-year starting quarterback. That is absolutely going to happen regardless of what happens with this competition. Should Notre Dame fans temper their expectations for the 25 season because of the quarterback? What are the expectations for this team, knowing that there's going to be a first-year starting quarterback?
I don't think expectations should be tempered down at all, because the makeup of the roster is such that when I look at what the expectations are for Notre Dame, it's you make the playoffs, you make a run. That's the expectation with the makeup of this roster. Quarterback plays a big part in it, but last season, those were the same expectations, and we were talking about that, albeit he started a couple years at Duke, but was somebody that we had not seen out of the spring take a snap in a Notre Dame football uniform yet. More experience, obviously, but he's injured. You don't know how chemistry is going to work out here. He had receivers and younger quarterbacks teaching him the offense, and the expectation was you still make the first 12-team playoffs, and then given what the rest of the landscape looks like, you go on a run. With the talent surrounding them, I absolutely think the expectation should remain the same. Now, to other people, maybe their expectations are different. Maybe I've seen some of it, which I heavily disagree with. There's a lot of people out there that say it's championship or bust. If that's your expectation, maybe you tamper it down. But that would be my advice, whether you're a Notre Dame fan, whether you're an Ohio State fan. I don't like that outlook on seasons for teams. But for Notre Dame specifically, no. It's a younger, inexperienced quarterback with an extremely high ceiling with a lot of talent around him, who's now going into his second year of an offense. That's another thing that Notre Dame offenses haven't been able to say, is continuity at the coordinator position. And so all those are going to be big.
Vince, I want to hear your opinion on this. To me, the only thing that should be tamped down is making sure that the expectations for whoever the starter is realistic. And not thinking like, okay, the starter's going to go out there, be elite, be a Heisman Trophy finalist, throw for X amount of yards, X amount of touchdowns,
right,
and be an All-American. And no, that's the only thing I'm tamping down. Is let's not get too carried away. Like, okay, is CJ going to throw for 4,000 yards or 4,500 yards? Is Kenny going to throw for 3,500 yards and rush for 1,000, or is he going to rush for 4,000 yards or pass for 4,000 yards and rush for 1,000? Like, that type of stuff needs to be tamped down, because again, I don't think they're going to be asking the team to ask them to carry that. But that's the only thing to me, Vince, that I think needs to be tamped down. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this since you asked the question, but like, I just think it's, hey, let's tamp down some of the crazy expectations for the starting quarterback and understand that he's going to be a cog in the machine this year.
Yeah.
The driver of the machine is still Jeremiah Love. It's still the offensive line. It's still Jadarian Price. It's still going to be Malachi Fields and Jaden Greathouse, and he is expected to simply be like, he's the conductor. But like, the conductor is only as good as the train that he's riding on. If there's issues with the train, there's nothing the conductor do about it. Like, it's like, I'm not that guy. I'm just steering this thing and getting people where they need to go. Those are the only expectations I have tamped down. But that's why the expectations for the team with a young quarterback should be more determined by what's around that young quarterback than necessarily that young quarterback.
I think that Notre Dame is in a very unique position, at least in my lifetime of watching Notre Dame football, where they've got great options at quarterback. And I don't think those options should hinder the expectations for this team. Now, I do think that September for Notre Dame, the schedule, it's tough, right? I mean, it's tough. Those first two games are tough, right? Going on the road to Miami, Texas A&M coming into town, like, it's tough. And so you hope, and I think Notre Dame has the depth and the talent to absorb those first couple of starts for the first-year quarterback, right? I don't think that'll be a problem. And I don't think, personally, my expectations of the position as Notre Dame gets into the second half of the season, where you see the conductor having a little bit more control over which way the train is going, to use your analogy there. I think that, it's okay for whoever it is to be a passenger on the train at first, still making decisions and doing all the things that you need to do as a quarterback. But then as the season starts to progress, now you're going to start seeing a little bit more of the quarterback's personality on the offense. And by the time you get to the playoff, which is where we all think Notre Dame belongs, regardless of who the quarterback is this year, whether it's Kenny Minchie, whether it's CJ Carr, once they get to the playoff, and I know it's a cliche, but you're not a freshman anymore. Like, you are now the leader of this offense, and you need to start making it run. Like that. That's where I'm at with my expectations. And I don't think that Notre Dame fans should feel much different. I mean, you are not going to be at a disadvantage because of who the quarterback is at Notre Dame. I think that's my overarching opinion about this. You're not going to be at a disadvantage. You do need to lean on the rest of the offensive weapons. And I do believe there are weapons there at wide receiver, at running back, obviously, at offensive line, and at coordinator. That's a big one. Okay, that's a big one. I just think they're not going to be at a disadvantage. And I think eventually that quarterback is going to grow into his own cleats and really lead the offense. Like that's where I'm at with expectations for this team. And I don't have a dog in the fight as far as who the quarterback is, because either one, I think the ceiling is high and they're going to be able to take this team where it needs to go. That is where we are going to transition over to some specific talk about each guy that is in this race. But before we do, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends, and of course, jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. As you heard Brian talk about before, we are not going to get into the recruiting weekend that just happened. A lot of stuff happened. That's over on the message boards. And so you want to go over the premium message boards, boards.irishbreakdown.com, get yourself a membership, and then you'll be in the know like the rest of us, because I read it this morning and now I'm in the know. And so I think all of you should do the same thing. So if you want that, you need to get over to boards.irishbreakdown.com. And then, of course, there's all kinds of written content over at irishbreakdown.com as well. So in the meantime, make sure you give us a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all of those fun things. And we'd really appreciate it. It really helps us make things go around here.